跳水啦，你有紧顿啦。
Welcome. Today we're talking to Professor Tan Sui Beng from the School of Arts, University Science Malaysia, an ethnomusicologist. Professor Tan has pioneered research about the multi-ethnic performing arts of Malaysia, and she has written many books and articles on the music and performing arts of Malaysia itself. Professor Tan is also an activist in promoting traditional music and developing music of sound. That is music using everyday objects, body percussions and sounds of the environment. It involves a lot of the young people, but that's a subject for another day. But today we're talking about just PoTeHi. Sui Beng embarked on the project and she started 6 years ago on the revitalization of PoTeHi. Sui Beng, can you please tell us what is PoTeHi?
PoTeHi is a type of Hokkien glove puppet theatre that was brought to Penang from Fujian province in the early 20th century. It was performed during Chinese temple celebrations, but was also an important form of entertainment for ordinary Hokkien people in Penang before television was invented. While there were more than 10 troupes in Penang in the past, there are only 4 left today. And the shows are staged for temple gods to watch. There is really no audience. There might be some old people, sitting around, or they might drop by, while a few children are running around. But that's all.
Basically, the troops were performing for the gods, not for the audience.
Yeah, basically. So young people are no longer interested to watch the form, as they do not understand the Hokkien language anymore. And of course, they prefer to listen to popular music, right? And old people prefer to watch TV serials. The troops also do not have young apprentices learning the form. So with this in mind, some of the artists and researchers decided to do something to rejuvenate the art form in Penang.
But going one step back, can I take one step back? Meaning that years ago, when they had these 10 troops that were performing, they had audiences. They had more people watching them at that time.
Yeah.
It was actually quite an interesting thing for the audience, right?
Yeah. Because in the past there was no television, and film is only for people who can afford to go and pay for the film. So people would just go to watch Chinese opera or PoTeHi, and it is a place for them to socialize as well. So besides praying, they will talk to each other, they will eat at the side stalls and so on. So it was like an entertainment for the whole family.
Okay.
But this is no longer the case today, because people have so many other types of entertainment that they can watch and participate in.
And it was free to the public, most of the performances?
The shows are free because the temples are the patrons, and the temples will pay the troops to perform. Yeah, so the people who live around the area will all congregate during the shows. They just sit around, they eat their dinner there, the children can play with one another, they can talk to each other and so on. So it's like public entertainment space. Yeah.
And when did specifically this one, would you say that it began to die off? The commercial or the popularity of PoTeHi, when did it start dying off? In the 1940s, 50s?
Well, the PoTeHi troops in Penang suffered during the war because many of them could not really perform. But after the war, the PoTeHi masters started performing again, but they began to adapt to the Taiwanese puppet theatre because they were not exposed anymore to troops from China. The troops from China were not allowed to come into Penang because of the change of government there. And some of the performers from the Taiwanese groups stayed back here during the war, and they started performing with the PoTeHi troops in Penang. Yeah. So after the war, it was still quite popular, but the form started to die off in the 1980s and 90s.
Yeah, I think as television and cinema started coming in, this took a back seat. Okay. So Ibeng, now you're trying to rejuvenate the interest in PoTeHi. Can you please tell us or elaborate, let us know how are you doing this?
Okay. So in 2016, a collective called Kawan PoTeHi, or Friends of PoTeHi, was started by the visual artist Liu Kung Yu to document the form. And we received some funding from Georgetown World Heritage Incorporation. With the funding, we interviewed the performers that are left in Penang about their lives and how the form changed through time. We also documented the changes in the manipulation techniques, the puppet features and roles, the stage design, music, and the costumes. So this resulted in the production of a box set with a book, pop-ups, posters, flip books, and a DVD about the form. We worked with artists such as Chia Chik Ying and Chiu Win Chen, or Okwilala, who made the book accessible with new designs. After the book publication, we had a sharing session with the PoTeHi masters from the different groups that was open to the public. Yeah. However, documentation alone cannot revive an endangered form. So I started a performance collective named Ombak PoTeHi to invigorate the transmission process. So a group of young people went to learn the form from the traditional masters of the Beng Yok Hong puppet troupe, and they started performing the traditional stories such as Adventures of the Monkey King first.
I got to join Ombak PoTeHi through Prof Tan. Actually, when I was younger, I joined many of her community arts projects. So when she let me know about PoTeHi, it was a very interesting thing. Firstly, I never knew about PoTeHi, and although I could speak Hokkien, I learned soon that the kind of Hokkien that they used was different. So it was a totally new experience, and I was excited to see how we could do this in a multicultural way.
Marcus and me used to be the volunteer of the arts ed. So the arts ed, during the arts ed event, we have to teach the kids how to play the traditional game and to make the traditional toys. So every event we have the pre-preparation. So one day, I still remember that day, Marcus brought the script of the PoTeHi. The script is written in Chinese, and I don't know why, I just take up the script and I read in Hokkien. So I still remember the script is 残無夠,水無流. After that, Marcus said, hey, you can read Hokkien. So do you want to join us for the PoTeHi? I said, no harm what. I can go to see to know more lah and to learn more. So okay. So after our first meeting, Professor Tan Swee Beng asked me to join and asked me to be the narrator for the supporting character of the first drama. If I'm not mistaken, the first drama is 路遥知马力.
Before I was involved in Ombak PoTeHi, I used to play the drums with Ombak Art Studio. And I got to know that this Ombak PoTeHi was looking for a drummer. And I was asked to join them because of my past experience of playing the drums.
I actually know Wai Ming. Wai Ming is one of the members from Kawan PoTeHi who is doing the research on Penang PoTeHi. That time she told me that Professor Tan looking for some young people to practice, to learn the PoTeHi from master. And that time she asked me, am I interested in to join them? And that time, yeah, because honestly, I love the Hokkien opera since I'm very small. So I think this is a chance for me to touch, to hands-on this kind of a performance. So through Wai Ming, I know Prof Tan, and then I start the journey in Ombak PoTeHi. How we learn for the puppet manipulation? First, through the observation from auntie performance and the video. And the second one, every bi-weekly, we will meet auntie at the Doaka Lane, and then auntie will hand by hand teaching us how to move the puppet. And also, the most challenges is the fighting scene, because you really not only moving the hand, but also you need to move the body, and also how you communicate with the drum master, because the way the master play the drum, right, is depend on the movement of the puppet. So how we can communicate with them, this is a very important way.
To attract multi-ethnic audiences, we created new stories that were based on the history of Penang. This resulted in the production of Kisah Pulau Penang, or Stories of Penang 1 and 2.
来来来来来，挑水啦，你有进度啦，
快要去玩啦喂！
表色心，只有是要为保地。
讲人咩是人问讲鬼，讲错错错错教，我心里嘛只有长命。
阿姨兄，话未嘛唔通安尼讲。
The performers talk to their grandparents, relatives, their friends about life in Penang in the past, and they incorporated these memories into the different scenes in the Penang story. For instance, many of the old people still remember the trauma that they faced during the Second World War. But the younger generation do not know any of this today because it is not written in the school textbooks, yeah? And the old people don't talk about this. Yeah? So Suk Ching, the purging of the Chinese people who were thought to be anti-Japanese, is a case in point. We added a scene in Kisah Pulau Penang 2 that shows the local collaborators with the heads covered, identifying people who were supposed to be anti-Japanese. These people either disappeared or they were killed. And all members of the audience, they were crying when they watched this scene being enacted. And the young people, all said that, oh, we never knew that this happened in the past. Additionally, we also added local characters who wore local costumes. The performers used Penang Hokkien and Malay dialects so that young people can understand the dialogue. They also sang folk songs and chants in local Penang Malay.
So this actually is one of the character in our story, Kisah Pulau Pinang, and you can see that this character is very localized because they are pakai baju panjang, right? And so Janet will perform the voice for this character.
地树小老娘，达里的浪天。阿娘我的名叫做小鸟，大人嘛 suka 叫我阿娘。规间厝内面呢，我做最细样的人是我。早个点点讲啊，我是贵宾领的水喏娘。
就讲要带你啊，来到船头，看见一寡新鲜的香料来卖，你看安怎嘛？
Boleh. Kau tahu tak, aku dah lama tak tengok Rempah-Ratus ni.
安尼咱行咯，来。
Ingat kita perlu jaga social distancing.
是，来，安尼咱行咯。是呀，恁听，大世界跳拢眼呢。
Lagu ronggeng.
呀，安尼咱来跳一曲咯。
Jom menari.
So Swee Beng, yes, it's very interesting that you've added new elements such as, Malay dialects, Hokkien, the new Hokkien dialects and songs and chants in local Penang Malay. What other things have you added, other new elements have you introduced into the performance of the PoTeHi in Penang?
Okay, we also added a lot of tricks, such as old man smoking, which the young puppeteers learned from the Taiwan puppet troupe that visited Penang some years ago. Then they added entertaining scenes such as the lion dance, the chingay, dragon dance, and other scenes. But I must stress that the recreated form of PoTeHi is based on the tradition itself. Yeah? So the puppet character types, manipulation and music have to be retained. Otherwise it's not PoTeHi anymore.
Yeah. The tradition and the old style that has been used has to be retained, but the different styles or the stories that have been told can be new ones.
Yeah, correct. And we also work with designers to recreate a portable stage, and we used animated sites to accompany the scene.
Cuaca banyak panas ni. Aduh, ini mesti makan laksa banyak sangat.
interesting thing about incorporating new things and into your presentations of the PoTeHi performances has allowed you to take the performances outside of beyond the temple, the traditional venues, you know. And I understand also that you've taken it to the heritage celebrations and also to the Georgetown Festival. And I believe that in 2016 you created something called the PoTeHi Journey. And there were other troops involved, you know, from Taiwan and Indonesia. Can you tell us something about that, please?
Yeah, so in 2016, we invited the Taiyuan puppet theatre troupe and a PoTeHi troupe from Gudo in Java to perform together with our local Penang troupe, which is the Bengyot Hong troupe. And it was very interesting for the three troupes to perform side by side because they found out that, you know, the puppet theatre actually changed so much in the different countries once they moved, the performers moved out of China. So, for example, in Gudo in Java, the performers use Bahasa Indonesia to perform. Even though the stories are from the PoTeHi stories, the costumes are traditional costumes, and the music is also traditional. But the language used is Bahasa Indonesia. So that is very different. And the Taiyuan Puppet Theatre has really brought in a lot of new innovations. Yeah? So they have introduced all kinds of new tricks to entertain the audience, you know, like the puppets can spin plates and bowls, you know, without breaking them, you know, or the puppets can smoke, right? So when they came, they actually taught the traditional performers, the Bengyot Hong, as well as Umbak PoTeHi. Yeah, so this exchange was very, very valuable, I think, for both the old traditional performers of Bengyot Hong as well as the PoTeHi young apprentices.
And the audience, how did the audience take to it, you know, in your opinion, when they performed during that time?
Yeah, I think the audience was a very, very mixed audience. And many people could understand the PoTeHi from Indonesia because they were speaking Bahasa Indonesia. So this was something that was very new for them. In comparison, the Taiyuan Puppet Theatre used very little talking. So they had a lot of singing and a lot of action. So you actually don't need to understand the Hokkien language to watch it, you see, to understand. Yeah, because there is very little language being used. It's more of action and tricks on stage.
So it would have been ways that they used to basically get the engagement of the younger public.
Yes, correct.
So
That's
they
the
have
way.
evolved themselves.
Yeah, yeah. So the forms have, you know, just evolved, and they've always been changing, yeah. But you can recognize that it is PoTeHi because of the manipulation technique, the traditional costumes, the traditional music that's being used.
Even the stages as well, you know, certain elements of it have been kept.
The stages that are used in Gudo, Java, and in Thailand, they are the traditional stage. Whereas the Penang one has been changed. The Penang one, you know, they've added panels, paintings on it, you see. But the traditional one is mainly carved.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, and you have different levels, and the puppets can actually appear from different levels of the stage.
So Swee Beng, I understand that, you know, it's been quite an interesting journey for you to come in and revitalize actually the PoTeHi journey and all that you've done. And now I also know that you have started some outreach programs. Could you tell us a little bit about that, please?
Yeah, so end of last year, we started to run some school workshops for school children. That was after we had our performance at the Penang House of Music, where we invited school children from various schools in Penang to come and watch, and they were all very enthusiastic at the end. So we decided to bring the PoTeHi to some selected schools as pilot program. And the young people, they ran some workshops in some of the schools in Georgetown for students of different ethnic backgrounds.
Yeah, the young people, you mean the young apprentices, the ones that you've been working with doing the shows?
Yes. So the young people in Ombak PoTeHi ran workshops on how to make the puppets and simple movements. And so the school children from different ethnic backgrounds started to paint the puppets in different colors because, you know, they are Indians, Chinese, and Malays in the group. The costumes that they colored and they made themselves also had different design. You know, if it's the Indian, you will know that the decoration is slightly different from the Chinese design. And then after that, they learn how to move the puppets slightly and just made some dialogue in their own language for the puppets that they created.
They created their own stories, so
Yes,
to say.
correct. Yeah.
You know, it's very interesting that the younger people that work with you are now moving on to schools and teaching even younger people. But how would you think that the older people feel about this? You know, the aunties and the uncles who have done this for years. You know, could you please share with us?
Yeah. So I think the aunties of the Beng Gyok Hong troupe especially, they have been encouraged by the young people and who are interested to learn from them. And they can also now play to new audiences at festivals as well. So the Auntie Si Han told me one day that, you know, oh, PoTeHi ki liao means PoTeHi has risen again. So you know, they are very excited about this new development. And now sometimes when they have a shortage of performers, they will call on the young apprentices to help them out in their shows as well.
So this has given a link, hopefully, that it will help to keep this performing art alive.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
So
during the COVID lockdown, you know, the young people, you know, tried to help the performers because they could not perform in the streets or in the temples at that time. So they applied for funding to run some projects.
I think we are trying to help the master, the artists, right, to get the funding through some virtual documentation. And we are trying to help them, and they really very excited to come to tell us that some performance scenes they would like to keep and record it down, and because they feel that nowadays the people are not really performing this scene in their performance, so it's very 珍贵 very 珍贵 So I also feel very touched when they come to tell me that 好啊，我感覺講這個新啊，在啲人嘅表演裏面時真正濟人無看過咧，所以我想要講我甲the two master after their discussion，人感覺講這個新真係重要，所以但是無錄到起來，就後擺就看無啦。So when they come to talk this to me, I will feel that yes, we do something right, and we are trying to helping. Maybe after 30 years, 50 years, right? We still can see something through the video recording.
actually, the project of revitalizing actually the PoTeHi has been quite a remarkable journey. It's not an easy one as what people seem to think. You know, it's just taking an old art. But I'm sure that the older people were quite guarded about their art, and then eventually getting very excited when the young people were interested, and then you've taken it beyond the temples to the outer Penang and introduce it to other people, and I understand also overseas as well. You know, so any closing words for this segment?
Yeah, I think this project has created new interest in a form that was endangered. It is important to engage the traditional performers and young people in reviving any traditional form. And I think very often young people, they think that tradition is very backward, right? But once they can identify with the stories, the characters, or the music, then they will want to learn and perform. Yeah. We also need to localize and contemporize the stories that can attract young people of different races. But we need to know the tradition first. So we have to learn the tradition before we can make changes to it. Malay and Indian kids who saw Kisah Pulau Pinang 1 and 2, they expressed interest in the form.
I think there's an attachment. Once you have an attachment to something, you become more interested in it, and you want to get involved in it and see how you can further develop it.
Yes, correct.
I think that's the engagement part.
Yeah.
So the journey does not stop here, and it still continues. And you've done the book, and I'm sure that you've got many other ideas to put forward in time to come. But you already initiated and moved the Ombak PoTeHi, and now they are existing by themselves. And you're taking a back seat on this now.
Yeah.
Understand, right?
Yeah.
You're allowing the younger ones to move forward in this.
Yeah. I think that is the way to revive any form, and we are advisors. We cannot hold on to the project forever, because the young people have to take over. Yeah.
So all in all, in closing, how many years have you spent when you first started until maybe now 2021? How many years have you spent?
I think almost 6 or 7 years already. I have put a lot of energy into it, but I can see that the form is growing, and there's a group of young people who are ready to take over.
So the seeds have been sown, and I think that the journey will continue, and hopefully it will flourish and become something bigger, And in closing, I would like to thank you for spending time with us, Professor Tan Swee Beng, ladies and gentlemen.